Captain Jake Morrison stood upon the bridge of the Pathfinder, gazing at the view screen with deepening bewilderment. His ship had been surveying the far reaches of the Andromeda sector for 3 months, and in all that time, they had encountered nothing except vacant voids and lifeless stones. Yet this system was unlike the rest. The fourth world from the star displayed signs that defied all logic. Linda Hayes, his chief science officer, lifted her eyes from her console, shock widening them. She had been examining the planet's surface for over an hour, and whatever she discovered clearly unsettled her. Jake approached her station and waited for her to explain. Linda was not a woman easily rattled, but her fingers trembled as she projected the data onto the main display. The planet below was frozen and desolate, lacking even the trace of an atmosphere. Yet scattered across its crust were structures, not natural formations, but constructions, barriers, pathways. Creations only an intelligent species could produce. Jake's heartbeat surged. Discovering alien ruins was the aspiration of every explorer in the fleet. Peter Grant, the navigation officer, was already calculating a trajectory to position them in orbit. Nicole Barnes, head of security, instinctively reviewed their defensive systems. The crew performed their duties with trained precision, but Jake could feel their anticipation mounting. This moment was why they endured the isolation of deep space missions. This was the purpose behind every silent starfield they had crossed. The Pathfinder descended through the faint whisper of atmosphere and settled beside the grandest edifice. Jake personally headed the landing party with Linda, Peter, and Nicole close behind. Their environmental suits shielded them from the frigid wasteland and the absence of breathable air. The ruins extended far into the distance, scarred by age yet unmistakably crafted by intelligent hands. Linda began collecting samples at once while Peter arranged scanning instruments. Nicole stood watch, though not a trace of movement existed anywhere across the planet. Jake wandered into what resembled a central courtyard, his boots crunching over ground forgotten by history. The architecture was alien yet strangely recognizable. The scale felt correct. The entryways matched familiar dimensions. The steps possessed the right proportions, the right depth. After 2 long hours of analysis, Linda called Jake over to her position. She had uncovered markings etched into one of the stone walls, symbols carved deeply with purpose. Jake examined them, but their meaning escaped him entirely. Linda was running a linguistic comparison through the ship's archive, checking against every recorded alien script in the galactic database. Nothing aligned. Yet that wasn't the most unsettling revelation. Linda's voice trembled as she revealed the carbon dating results. The structures were more than 50,000 years old. 50,000. It made no sense. The Zertal, the oldest spacefaring civilization known, had only mastered faster-than-light engines 12,000 years prior. Humanity had not even spent a full millennium in the stars. No species should have been erecting settlements on remote worlds 50 millennia in the past. Peter arrived next, his expression pale behind his visor. He had made another discovery, star charts carved into the observatory floor. They illustrated the nearby star cluster, and among them was Earth. Not just any Earth, but Earth during the last ice age, glaciers dominating the northern hemisphere. Jake felt a shiver rise that had nothing to do with the frigid air. He ordered the team to return to the ship and convened an emergency briefing. Linda displayed her findings via hologram. With deeper analysis, the inscriptions showed patterns eerily similar to ancient human languages: Sumerian, Proto-Indo-European, tongues that should not exist here, on a world light years from Earth. Nicole asked the obvious question: was this a deception? A complex ruse or manipulated information? But who would attempt something so elaborate, and how could anyone falsify carbon samples on such a scale? The truth was irrefutable. These ruins were unfathomably ancient and created by beings aware of Earth, who used linguistic roots that would eventually surface in human civilization. Linda proposed a possibility that silenced the room. What if humans had been here before? Not modern humanity, but an ancient, forgotten human civilization that once reached the stars and then vanished. What if everything they believed about humanity's beginnings was flawed? Jake knew he had to inform Fleet Command, even as he feared the upheaval this revelation would create. The interstellar order rested on the idea that the elder species were truly ancient, older and wiser than humans. If humanity had roamed the cosmos when others were still primitive, it would shatter everything. Jake drafted his report with precision, sticking strictly to verified facts and avoiding conjecture. He transmitted it through quantum relay to Earth, where it would arrive within hours. Then he instructed the team to continue their examinations. If one site existed, there could be more. Over the following 3 days, 6 additional structures were found across the surface, each reinforcing the same narrative: ancient, human-like, unbelievable. Linda uncovered genetic remnants inside a sealed chamber, preserved by ice and exposure to vacuum. Her analysis left her breathless. The DNA matched human genetics by 98%. Connected yet primeval. Peter discovered a dormant data core beneath one of the ruins, powerless but intact. He carefully removed it for study aboard the Pathfinder. If they succeeded in restoring its systems, they might unlock answers lost to time. That night, Jake sat alone in his cabin, sleep eluding him. He replayed every detail: the doorways, the staircases, the chambers shaped for human form. Those long-gone builders had walked like humans, thought like humans, spoken precursors to human speech thousands of years before Earth's recorded history. The magnitude of it all weighed heavily. Then a message arrived from Fleet Command. They were deploying an archaeological team and a diplomatic envoy. The Galactic Council had been briefed and requested authorization to dispatch observers. Every faction in the stars wanted to witness the ruins firsthand. Every mind sought answers. Jake gazed down at the silent world, its ancient monuments bathed in the Pathfinder's floodlights. Somewhere in that forgotten stone lay truths humanity had chased since the dawn of thought. Where did we come from? Are we alone? What is humanity's place among the stars? Yet now the questions had twisted into something far more unsettling. Where did we go? What happened to us? And how could we forget? Ambassador Claire Watson stepped from the diplomatic shuttle onto the polished platform of Nexus Prime. The Galactic Council headquarters towered above her like a crystalline mountain, its shimmering spires piercing the alien clouds. She had visited countless times, but never under such unprecedented circumstances. Earth's directive was simple: assure the Council that humanity posed no threat or risk isolation from galactic society. The council chamber sprawled in a grand circular formation, tiered seats filled with delegates of every major starfaring species. Claire moved to the central podium, feeling the scrutiny of 1,000 eyes. The Zaral spokesperson, High Curator Velos, rose to address the assembly. His tone carried the authority of a civilization that believed itself ancient beyond challenge. Velos spoke of contamination and deception. He implied the ruins were a fabrication, an audacious ploy to elevate humanity's standing. His words were courteous, but his accusation unmistakable. Humanity was lying. The data was falsified. The Council should disregard the matter entirely and focus on true concerns. Claire waited, calm and poised. She had brought holographic scans, first-hand testimony from the Pathfinder's crew, and most critically, Linda Hayes' genetic report. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. The evidence was genuine. The analysis was exhaustive. Independent review was not only accepted but encouraged. Humanity welcomed transparency. Meanwhile, on the ancient world soon designated Site Alpha, Dr. Alan Cooper supervised a team of 50 specialists. They had established a research outpost beside the largest complex and undertaken the most ambitious archaeological mission in history. Alan had devoted his life to studying lost civilizations, yet nothing had prepared him for this. Each day uncovered new marvels, rooms filled with devices beyond interpretation, vaults preserving materials that should have decayed millennia ago, hallways echoing faint traces of recognizable design. Alan wandered corridors that felt hauntingly familiar, though they had been crafted long before humanity learned to sow fields. Kevin Price, a junior researcher only recently graduated, had been tasked with cataloging minor relics. He worked tirelessly, examining each piece and submitting it to analysis. Most discoveries were tools or domestic items, aged but identifiable. Yet on his 3rd week, Kevin uncovered something extraordinary. A slim cylinder, no larger than his thumb, fashioned from a light-absorbing black material. He nearly overlooked it, concealed in the corner of a storage chamber. When he lifted it, warmth radiated from its surface. Kevin hurried to Alan, who instantly recognized the object as some form of data vessel. For days, the team attempted to decipher its contents, every method yielding nothing. Their efforts stalled until Linda Hayes arrived from the Pathfinder, bringing specialized interfaces. She recommended using a quantum resonance link to access the device. It was a gamble, but there were no better options. The cylinder came to life with a faint vibration. A hologram flickered into being above it, revealing the image of a human-shaped figure wearing clothing unlike anything in current archives. The figure began to speak, its voice human, its cadence ancient, yet the language completely foreign. The Pathfinder's linguistic core immediately began dissecting the vocal patterns, cross-referencing them with every known branch of human language. It required 3 hours to produce a partial translation. The message remained fragmented, incomplete, yet unmistakable in meaning. The speaker claimed to be a keeper of records, one of the last survivors of a civilization that had once stretched across the stars. They spoke of arrogance in conquest, of technology outpacing wisdom, of a downfall no one could stop. The final translated line froze every person present. We ruled among stars, and pride destroyed us. Let those who follow remember. Guard this truth. Do not repeat our fate. Alan transmitted the recording to Earth and the Galactic Council without delay. The meaning could not be dismissed. An ancient human empire had existed. It had mastered interstellar travel, built cities on distant worlds, and then fallen, leaving ruins and a warning in its wake. Claire received the transmission at Nexus Prime. She called for an emergency assembly and initiated the projection. The hologram hovered in the council chamber, the ancient voice echoing. Even Velos faltered at the sight. The chamber exploded into argument. Some claimed it proved humanity's inherent danger, that the same destructive impulses lingered in their descendants. Others countered that every species carried violent history, that redemption and progress were universal possibilities. The Karathi ambassador spoke earnestly of her people's own long struggle to overcome bloodshed. Why should modern humans be condemned for the actions of ancestors lost to 50 millennia? Yet fear spread quickly. If humanity had once commanded a galactic civilization, if their forgotten machines still endured after eons, what might their future hold? Could the same flaw that shattered the ancient empire still live within them? On Earth, reactions fractured. Pride surged in some that humanity had once been mighty. Others felt disgrace at a legacy of ruin. Faith leaders argued whether the ancients were truly human or something separate. Scientists debated genetics, evolution, and how history might be rewritten. Dr. Helen Foster, a prominent xenoanthropologist, proposed a unified study of all sites. She wanted to learn not only what the ancients built, but who they were, and why collapse consumed them. The proposal was accepted, and she was granted a research vessel and hand-picked specialists. The explorer would hunt for more lost cities across the stars. Alan pressed onward at Site Alpha, descending deeper into forgotten halls. He located archives filled with texts engineered to endure time. He found laboratories whose machines still held faint currents of power. And in the lowest vault, behind doors that took days to breach, he uncovered the greatest revelation yet. A map, a stellar chart marking dozens of worlds, each symbol designating a site like the one they stood upon. The ancient humans had not created a lone colony. They had seeded hundreds, perhaps thousands, spread across systems light-years apart. Each location was a key to a galactic-wide mystery. Alan sent the coordinates to Helen, who immediately began preparing missions to every point. The explorer launched with a crew of eager volunteers, knowing each new world could reveal another fragment of humanity's forgotten story. They stepped onto frozen wastes and humid jungles, scorched deserts and endless oceans. And on every world they found the same thing: cities long dead, structures carved by human hands, a civilization abandoned by time. Claire addressed the Galactic Council again, presenting incontrovertible proof of a star-spanning human empire. She watched disbelief ripple across alien faces as they realized an uncomfortable truth. Humanity was not the youngest race to reach the stars. Humanity had returned to them. The Zertile were not the first children of the cosmos. The title belonged to a species that had vanished before recorded galactic history began, leaving only their descendants to rediscover the stars. The Council voted to impose oversight on humanity's expansion. Every colony would be monitored, every technological advance examined, Every diplomatic move scrutinized. It was not triumph, but it was not exile. Claire accepted the verdict without protest. Trust would take time, and humanity would have to earn it. Back at Site Alpha, Kevin sat alone, replaying the ancient warning. The first humans had risen too fast. Their reach had exceeded their wisdom. Their power had burned brighter than their judgment. And now their children were forced to walk the same knife edge, hoping not to fall the same way. Was humanity ready for that burden? Or would they repeat the same mistakes and vanish again into myth? Dr. Helen Foster braced herself against the icy wind on Talus 9. This was the sixth world she had excavated, and it echoed the same grim truth. Beneath centuries of ice, an enormous structure surfaced, scarred not by time but by battle. Helen knew the marks: blast signatures, impact cavities, metal melted by weapons of terrifying power. The war here had been brutal, intentional. Inside, she found the truth she had feared most: a military fortress torn apart by human hands. The first civilization had not fallen to aliens or fate. They had destroyed themselves in a war that consumed system after system. She documented command rooms, barracks, recovery bays, and deep memorial chambers etched with tens of thousands of names, each one a life lost to a war of their own making. Commander Ryan Blake led another team on Virtus 3, tasked not with discovery, but containment. Humanity feared what may lie buried in the ashes of their ancestors. Ryan's unit hacked through thick jungle until they reached a sealed vault. The doors had endured 50,000 years, and the weapons inside were still powered, still alive. The arsenal defied belief. Some devices resembled advanced human arms, but others were terrifyingly foreign. One could collapse stellar fusion. Another generated gravity wells capable of crushing worlds. These were not mere weapons. They were extinction engines. Ryan sealed the vault and stationed armed guards. His encrypted report reached Fleet Command within hours. The response was immediate and absolute. No one was to activate the cache. No one was to study the weapons. The site was now classified at the highest level possible. Humanity was not prepared for such power and perhaps never would be. At Nexus Prime, panic swelled. Rumors of the weapon cache leaked. Alien governments demanded answers. Claire defended humanity yet again, arguing that discovery did not equal intent. But Velos had shed diplomacy. He demanded quarantine, the arrest of humanity's progress. Others agreed, claiming peace could not survive a species whose ancestors once carried the power to erase stars. Claire countered fiercely. Modern humanity had sought peace, not conquest. They had joined willingly, cooperated diligently, contributed openly. They deserved judgment for their actions, not for the sins of ghosts buried beneath ancient stone. Yet fear weighed heavier than truth. The council called for a vote. Earth burned with debate. Some demanded reclamation of ancient power. Strength, they argued, was the only shield in a dangerous universe. Others warned that power had once devoured humanity. It would do so again. The government held a neutral front, but behind sealed doors, the arguments grew heated. Admiral Greg Tucker pressed for awakening ancient technology. Survival demanded strength. If humanity once forged weapons of stars, they should learn to do so again. Director Megan Curtis opposed him with equal intensity. She had studied centuries of war. She knew power always begged for use. The ancients had perished under the weight of their own might, and the same fate awaited those who followed. Helen continued charting humanity's forgotten empire. The ancients called themselves the first diaspora, believing they were destined to rule the cosmos. Their machines evolved faster than their morality. Their minds stretched further than their restraint. Factions arose, each promising humanity's salvation. Some sought transcendence beyond physical form. Others dreamed of conquest without limit. A few pleaded for balance, but their voices drowned beneath fanaticism. Their war lasted centuries. Worlds turned to ash, stars torn apart. Countless trillions died, and in the below is your rewritten version with tone, theme preserved, and same meaning. I kept the length closely matched to your original text. In the end, no side prevailed. The first diaspora simply vanished, consumed by its own arrogance and endless conflict. Helen uncovered proof that some among them had foreseen the collapse. They attempted to safeguard their knowledge, building secret vaults and concealed data repositories. But they also undertook something else, something far more astonishing. On a distant moon circling a massive gas planet, Helen uncovered a genetic research complex. Inside were instruments made to alter DNA, to design new species and seed worlds with life shaped by intention. And at the very heart of the lab, she located a record, a manifesto, a blueprint. The document outlined a mission to create a new branch of humanity, one that would be placed upon young, undeveloped planets and allowed to grow naturally over ages. These new humans would not inherit the mastery or destructive capabilities of the first diaspora. They would begin from the ground up, advancing slowly, gaining wisdom step by step. They would serve as humanity's redemption. Helen understood the truth. Modern humans were not simply descendants of the first starfarers. They were a crafted new beginning. The ancients had seeded numerous planets with early human forms, Earth among them. They had granted these populations the potential to rise again, but only after learning the lessons their creators had ignored. The discovery struck her like thunder. Helen transmitted everything she found back to Earth and the Galactic Council. This was not humanity rediscovering old roots. It was humanity learning that it had been deliberately built as a second chance, a purposeful attempt to avoid repeating ancient ruin. Claire delivered Helen's findings before the Council. The meaning was staggering. Present-day humans stood as both offspring and spiritual heirs of the vanished empire. They held the same spark for brilliance and destruction, but something more as well. A conscious choice by their originators to grant them a clean beginning, untouched by inherited power. The vote to restrict humanity's expansion was delayed while leaders debated the new reality. Some council members insisted nothing had changed. A species capable of such old horrors remained a threat even if born anew. Others believed the revelation proved that the ancients recognized their errors and tried to forge a wiser future. Meanwhile, on distant colonies, human settlers continued their ordinary lives. They planted crops. They built towns. They raised their children. They lived without knowledge of the fierce debate shaping their destiny. They simply existed as humans always had, enduring, striving, and reaching forward with stubborn hope. Perhaps that alone was the answer neither the ancients nor the council fully grasped. Humanity's might was not born from weaponry or science. It came from its relentless refusal to surrender, even when the universe seemed unwinnable. The installation on Kepler 442c had been hidden for a purpose. Dr. Alan Cooper faced the towering entrance, pulse racing as ancient lock systems finally recognized the override his team had fought months to decode. With a whisper of releasing pressure, the gates slid apart, unveiling a chamber untouched for 50 millennia. Inside was perfection. Backup energy grids had preserved the habitat flawlessly, regulating air, warmth, and moisture to human-safe precision. Alan guided his crew down passages bordered by glass panels revealing rooms beyond. In each stood a tall stasis cradle, and in every cradle rested a human figure frozen in time. Hundreds of them, men and women of varied ages, clad in simple attire, unaged and unmoving. Dr. Sophie Grant, Alan's medical specialist, analyzed the nearest pod and confirmed the stunning readings it produced. These individuals were alive. Their biological activity had been slowed to almost nothing, yet faint neural signals remained. They were not gone. They were merely resting. The authorization to revive them came directly from humanity's highest leadership. There were countless risks. The ancient humans might awaken hostile. They might carry pathogens modern science could not fight. Their minds might be so alien that dialogue would fail completely. Yet the potential value outweighed every danger. These individuals had walked the worlds of the first diaspora. They had witnessed its triumphs and its downfall. They could offer truths archaeology alone could never uncover. Sophie selected 3 stasis pods according to the attached records. The first held a man named Daniel Cross, once a starship commander and explorer. The second contained Amy Parker, identified as a geneticist and biologist. The third preserved an older man called Victor Lang, whose designation translated to something similar to elder counselor or senior statesman. Reviving them required 12 meticulous hours. Sophie oversaw every stage, carefully regulating the pod functions as each sleeper slowly neared consciousness. Modern medicine assisted, but the pods themselves were masterpieces. The ancients had perfected the craft. Daniel stirred first. His eyes opened gradually, unfocused at the start before sharpening with recognition. He surveyed the unfamiliar medical room, studying the strange devices and unfamiliar faces. When he attempted speech, his words sounded like a blend of Latin and archaic Greek, yet distinct from both. The translation AI struggled at first, but it conveyed his question. Where was he and what era was this? Alan answered slowly, speaking through the translator, explaining that 50 millennia had passed, that the first diaspora had perished, and that a new branch of humanity had risen from the seeds his people planted. Daniel's face displayed deep sorrow mixed with fragile hope. He shut his eyes briefly, then nodded with quiet acceptance. He had expected this possibility. He had entered suspension because he believed humanity deserved another beginning. Amy and Victor revived within hours. The three ancients sat together in the infirmary, conversing softly in their forgotten tongue, trying to grasp the truth of their fate. Sophie monitored them continuously, but their health held steady. The technology had succeeded flawlessly. As weeks passed, the ancient trio mastered modern English with astonishing speed. Their neural implants, installed before stasis, accelerated learning. Daniel explained that such enhancements were once common until factions later weaponized them for darker uses. Intelligence Officer Lisa Morgan led the interrogations with historian Carl Bennett assisting. They spent long days gathering testimony, seeking to understand the vanished empire. Daniel recounted voyages of discovery, the thrill of settling new systems, and humanity's spread through the stars. Amy detailed the genetic work that shaped modern humans. She had participated in designing the seeding initiative. They had taken human genetic code and altered it slightly, removing heightened aggression while preserving intellect and adaptability. They then placed these engineered humans across many worlds, Earth included, and observed as new societies slowly formed. Victor offered the political and cultural perspective. He described how the first diaspora began with hope and idealism. Their dream was to bring life and advancement across the galaxy. But success birthed pride. As their influence expanded, factions emerged claiming exclusive wisdom. Some sought to uplift other species by force, compelling them toward human-level intelligence. Others urged isolation and pure human growth. Another group pushed to abandon physical bodies entirely and ascend as pure thought. Disputes became conflicts. Conflicts escalated to devastation. Victor spoke of the collapse with trembling voice. He had seen planets turn to ash. He had watched armadas annihilate each other in blazing cosmic battles. He lost companions, family, and finally faith. When the seeding plan was proposed as a final attempt to save something of their kind, he championed it wholeheartedly. Entering stasis was voluntary. Thousands chose to sleep across epochs, praying that one day new human civilizations. These sleepers were alive. Most pods had been hidden on distant worlds, some lost to time, others like Kepler 442c preserved by design. Word of the revived ancients spread fast. Some welcomed them as kin returned. Others eyed them as relics of a violent past. The Galactic Council insisted the ancients come to Nexus Prime for questioning. Ambassador Claire negotiated terms. They would testify freely, not as captives. Daniel, Amy, and Victor consented, curious to meet the civilization that had grown from their seeds. The voyage allowed them to learn about modern humans and the diverse species sharing the galaxy. When they stood in the council chamber, silence fell. These were not academics, but the ancients themselves, returned from an age so remote it seemed like myth. Velos, the Zero delegate, pressed them hard about the arsenals and the wars that consumed their era. Daniel did not evade the charge. Yes, they had forged terrible arms. Yes, they had turned them on each other. Yes, pride and blindness led to ruin. Yet, he said, in the end, some chose to sacrifice their own continuance rather than let their civilization continue on a path of annihilation. Amy explained the seeding program plainly. Modern humans were not mere experiments or lesser copies. They were fully human, endowed with the potential of the first diaspora, but without its immediate access to its destructive technologies. They had been granted time to cultivate judgment before acquiring power. Victor addressed the Council's anxieties head-on. The present humans were not the same polity that had fallen. They had matured gradually, learning from their own history rather than inheriting older mistakes. They had built their societies by toil and cooperation and should be evaluated on their actions. Together, the three offered a bargain. They would divulge all they knew of the first diaspora, instruct modern humanity on the hazards of unfettered power, and serve as advisors and teachers if humanity were permitted to remain free within the galactic community. The council debated for days. Claire lobbied tirelessly. When the vote came, it was narrow but decisive. Humanity would be admitted as full members, judged by the same rights and duties as any other race, while the ancients would be acknowledged as historians and mentors. Daniel, Amy, and Victor elected to remain awake. They knew hundreds of their fellows still slumbered across the stars, but waking them en masse would be destabilizing. Instead, they vowed to act as living bridges between the vanished past and the present, guiding their descendants away from repeating ancient errors. They had failed once 50,000 years ago. Perhaps now, through those descendants, success might be possible. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship Horizon, watching the tactical array with a tightening jaw. 50 human vessels held formation at the frontier, weapons cold but shields raised. An equal number of alien warships mirrored them. The standoff had persisted for 3 days and tensions were fraying. The Galactic Council had passed a resolution demanding the immediate surrender of all recovered ancient technology. Weapon caches, data stores, everything unearthed from first diaspora sites, and had ordered a moratorium on human expansion pending a committee review of human tech and intentions. Jake's orders from Earth were clear and perilous. Do not fire first, but do not capitulate. Hold the line and buy Claire time to negotiate. It was a razor's edge. One misstep could ignite a war. Claire worked non-stop on Nexus Prime, meeting delegates from scores of species, searching for compromise. The Zeral were the loudest opposition, Velos insisting the record proved humans were a danger. Their forebears had nearly obliterated whole systems, and modern humans might repeat it. Other races were more sympathetic yet still wary. The Karathi envoys met privately with Claire, expressing their concern that her